Today for Math Workshop, you're going to need your math notebook, highlighters, pencil, glue stick, your Envisions workbook, that is the skinny workbook that has black and white pages, and your blue resource folder. You're going to go ahead and open up your blue resource folder that's located inside of your anchor binder. On the left side, go ahead and take off the black clip. You're going to take out the teach pages, the one that says 3-5. The first sentence says an area model helps you visualize. And you're going to also take out the practice page that has a rectangle divided into 3 sections. The numbers on the top are 1,990. The rest of the pages, go ahead and clip back to the left pocket. Just a reminder that on Friday is our next supply pickup for the resources we need for our everyday lessons. So please make sure you remind your parents that Friday during the school day, they need to come by the Harvey front office to pick up those supplies. Close that blue folder and make sure that it stays in your anchor binder. Put that anchor binder back in your basket. Go ahead and take out your math notebook. We're going to turn back to our lesson from last week. The last lesson we completed together was area models and partial products, which we are going to continue to add to. Remember that we completed the teach page, and on the right side page for your work, you were asked to complete your practice section and reflection. And then today, before your assignment, you should have gone over the answer key for 3-4. We're going to turn the page, and we're going to go ahead and write the next page numbers, which is page 48 on the left and page 49 on the right. Before we insert the teach pages, let's turn back to the table of contents. And we're going to insert number 48, which is called more use of area model. And we're going to abbreviate partial products, but it's PAR period, PROD period. So we know that we're continuing on with the information that we started learning last week, but now we're using it in more practice. So you're going to put today's date, which is 9-29-20. Remember, at any point you can pause the video and then get yourself organized and caught up, and then push play when you're ready to move on. Go ahead now and turn back to today's pages 48 and 49. We're going to glue our 2 pages that we're going to use for today's lesson. So make sure that the teach page, the one that says vocabulary, is on the left. The one that says example practice reflection goes on the right. Use your glue stick to make your border, cross through the middle, and then turn them over. Make sure you remember to smooth them up from bottom to top. And then the same with the practice. And if you happen to cover up your page numbers, remember to go ahead and take an opportunity to stop and rewrite those numbers so you can keep yourself organized with those. We're going to go ahead and start with the left side by writing the title. So we said this is more use of area model, and we'll abbreviate again. So partial product. And because we are writing that, you in pencil, Miss Ling in pen, use your highlighter to make your highlighted title box. Remember, don't highlight over top of your title. We want to make sure we can read your writing. So go ahead and make your box. And we're going to go ahead to the top of the teach box to go ahead and start with our information that we need to know for today. It says an area model, so we're going to remind ourselves area model helps you visualize, and visualize is something we do in reading, but we also do in math. So it's making our pictures in our mind, or we can take those pictures we're making in our mind and draw a quick picture. So we're visualizing the partial products, and remember, partial product means part of the answer, needed to find the product of 2 factors. So we're going to say that this is a review, and we're going to put the previous lesson pages, so 46 and 47. Review pages 46 and 47. So this is just a reminder that we're building ourselves this resource to then utilize as a reminder of previously learned standards and skills, tricks and tips. This is your book you're creating, so you need to make sure you're using it to remind yourself of previously learned material. So we're going to go down to our first example. It says to find, and the first expression we're going to start looking at is 7 times 483. It says to multiply each place value to find the partial product. And we need to remember that when it says place value, we're going to be using that trick of pulling those place values separately to show the value for each of the digits in that second or larger factor. So if the number was 483, we're going to be separating them into separate values according to those place values. So we took the 4 and made that into a 400. The 8 is then added to say that 8 in the tens place is 80, and the 3 in the ones place is still 3. So our area model is representing how we're using our partial product or pulling those into their separate values. And then the side number, which is our original factor, is still going to represent the groups of. So when we look at this, we're going to do it one place value at a time. So we're going to start with the smallest place value. So we're going to start by saying 7 groups of 3, which means the basic fact of 7 times 3 gives me that partial product of 21. Because this section is 21, I'm also going to squeeze that amount into this section of this model. This helps me visualize how my model together will represent the final product in the end. We then go to the next digit that was in the tens place, so that 8 is an 80. So we say 7 times 80, we use our zeros trick, take the 0, place it in the answer. We're left with the basic fact of 7 times 8. If you know your multiplication, you should know 7 times 8 is 56. So we place the 56 in front of the 0 to make that product 560. Because we have the product to show that this section of the area model is 560, we're going to go ahead and squeeze that amount in, so 560. We're going to then put an addition sign to show that these are going to be added values in the end. Our last place value that we pulled apart was the 4 in the hundreds place, so we said 407, so 7 times 400. Use the zeros trick again, place the 2 zeros in the answer. The basic fact that we multiply is 7 times 4. 7 times 4 is 28, so the 28 goes in front of the zeros. And then we need to put the comma to show the correct placement, so this is 2,800. We then use the answer to place in the area model to represent the largest section. So now the area model has documented the partial products for each of those pulled apart place values. And we are going to then transfer that into the second part where it says to add the partial products. So we're going to just highlight our reminder. So we're going to pull the first number we said was 21. Second number was 560. The third value was 2,800. Then we need to go ahead and add up the values. Anytime I rewrite an addition sentence, because it's addition, it doesn't matter the order of the add-ins. So I always place the largest add-in at the top and then progress to a smaller number if it is there, just so it stacks nice and evenly and I can make sure that my place values line up appropriately. So now we're going to add up in the ones place. 0 plus 0 plus 1 gives me 1. Tens place, 0 plus 6 plus 2 gives me an 8. In the hundreds place, 8 plus 5 is 13, so I record the 3, regroup my 1, then make sure I have my comma to show the correct place. In my thousands place, I have my regrouped 1 plus 2 to give me the value of 3 in the thousands. So my total for my product is then rewritten in the answer line, so 3,381 is my final answer. When we look at the second step, it says you can use rounding to estimate. So this is our second type of problem that we did for this unit when we used our rounding steps and we sang our songs to remember the order in which we found the place, look next door, and we were able to do this. We could use the rounding to check our work. So that's what's going to be the second step for today. So we're going to take the original number and we're going to say we're only going to round the larger factor. So rounding the larger factor. So we rewrite 483 and we're going to stack the original multiplication because this is going to be how we show our work for rounding. So we're going to pull only the top number over to change. So when we say we're going to round, we normally round to the largest place value. So if I found my place, that's the hundreds place, I look next door, the next door neighbor is 5 or more, raise a score. So that means I'm raising the score of what number is underlying. And when we raise the score, we only can raise it by 1. So we add the 1 to say, well, that 4 has been changed to round up to 5. And now we sing the rest of the song to say, look to the right, zero's in sight. So I start at the arrow and count how many places are changing to 0. So I have 1, 2 places. So that means there's 2 places that are now zeros. So the number 483 is rounded to the number 500. The second value or the second factor does not change because it's a single digit and we do not need to round a single digit. So now we can use our zeros trick, move the 2 zeros to the product, lasso the basic fact that's left. 5 times 7 gives me the answer of 35. Put my comma to show the correct placement. So my estimated value is 3,500. Now I want to rewrite the information I just figured out. So we said we rounded the second factor to 500. We got the product of 3,500. And then we can determine whether or not our actual answer is reasonable by comparing it to the estimated value. So we talked about last week when we were looking for reasonableness. If the answer is pretty close to what is the actual value, we would consider this to be reasonable. If the numbers were too far off, we would say that's not reasonable because it's not going to be anywhere close to what the answer actually is. So we can say that this is reasonable, and we're going to just write this to the side and we're going to put a check mark to say that we checked the work. Now moving into the examples underneath, it's once again telling me to use, so this is the procedure, partial product, and an area to find the product. So when it says an area, this is talking about the area model, which is this quick picture that you're drawing a rectangle to represent pulling apart of values. So the original problem was 625 times 3. So when we look at our area model, they've already done the work for us. So the single factor or the second factor is placed on the side to say this is how many groups I have. The number at the top is the expanded form or pulling apart of the values for each place value. So there was a 6 in the hundreds place, so that's represented by 600. There was a 2 in the tens place, so that's represented by 20. And a 5 was in the ones place, so that's represented by 1 or a single digit, which is 5. Looking at each of these sections in the rectangle, they're represented in how much room they're taking up by how big the number is. So 600 is quite a big number, so it's taking up the majority of the rectangle. The 20 is representing a smaller value, so that rectangle is a little bit smaller. And then the 5 in the ones place is a very small value, so it's just a sliver at the end. We're now going to go ahead and plug in the information to use partial products. So it says how many hundreds, so we're looking at the first 2 numbers. So we're saying there's 3 groups of 600, so they're represented. We're looking at 3 times 600. We're using our zeros trick. So take out the 2 zeros, place them in the answer. We're left with the basic fact of 3 times 6. 3 times 6 gives me the product of 18 to place in front of the zeros. Then I place my comma between the thousands and the hundreds place. This product is then inserted in my area model to show the answer when multiplying the number to the side and the number at the top. So 3 times 600 is the answer inside. This is also going to be placed on our stacked multiplication to represent the product, so 1,800. Moving to this next smaller place value of the tens place, it says how many tens are here. So we're multiplying the 3 groups times 20. So the groups comes from the side. So we say 3 times 20, which is right up here. we put the equal sign, take the 0, place it in the answer, left with the basic fact of 3 times 2 to give me the answer of 6 to be placed in front of the 0. So we say that the product of 3 times 20 is 60. So I'm going to write it in the area model so I can visually see. I can also put an addition sign just so I remember that I'm adding the partial products in the end. And then I also can rewrite it in the stacked form for partial product multiplication. My last step is now to multiply the ones place. So looking at my area model, I have one more section to put an answer in. So I'm multiplying once again the 3 groups times 5. We don't need to use the zeros trick because this is a basic fact. So our product is 15. I can then put the plus sign plus 15, and I can also rewrite it in the stacked version of partial product. And now I have my 3 values I'm going to push back together to find my final answer. So in this case, they already have the numbers stacked, so I can go ahead and add 0 plus 5 gives me a 5 in the ones place. In the tens place, 0 plus 6 plus 1 is 7. In the hundreds place, the 8 gets brought down. I'm just going to rewrite the comma just to make sure I can see it. And in the thousands place, the 1 gets brought down to have the final product of 1,875. When we look at the next step, it says to use rounding to now estimate the same problem. So we're going to stack our numbers just like we did up in the top to stack and determine whether or not we have an estimated number that's going to be similar. So 625, that's the larger factor I place at the top. I can then rewrite the original factor, which is going to represent our groups. So 625 times 3, but because I'm using rounding, I know that I'm pulling my numbers to the side. The larger factor always is the only one that gets rounded. So I find the place of the largest place value. I look next door, so I'm putting my arrow. 5 or more, raise the score. 4 or less, let it rest. So this is a 4 or less, so it means the underlying number is resting, so it's not changing. So that stays the 6. Look to the right, zeros in sight. I have 1, 2 places that need to turn to zeros, so I put my 2 zeros to say that this is a rounded number. 625 is rounded down to 600. The smaller factor is then taken and slid over and just rewritten. Nothing has changed. Now I can use my zeros trick. 2 zeros in the answer. Last of the basic fact that's left. 6 times 3 gives me the product of 18, so I write my 18. And then I place the comma between the thousands and the hundreds place. And then it says use rounding to estimate 3 times 625. So I'm rewriting the problem. So 3 groups of the rounded number 600 was equal to 1,800. So this is the same process that we did in the teach box at the top. Moving to the last question, it says, is your answer to exercise 3 reasonable? So this is when we make our comparison to the original number and the estimated number. These are pretty close, so we would say yes, comma, 1,800 is close to 1,875. So we were able to make that quick comparison and say that, well, this is only 75 off from the rounded number, so that's pretty close. Now moving to our practice page, we are given another partial product that we're going to be asked to do the same exact 3 steps. So we're still following this 3 steps that we followed in the example in the teach box and the second practice one right underneath. So the first step was to use partial product and find the actual answer. So we're going to use the area model as well as stacking that information. So we have to then say, okay, well, the first number is our 2 times 1,000. So I'm going to write 2 times 1,000 is equal to, and we can use our zeros trick. So 1, 2, 3 zeros, 1, 2, 3, basic fact, 2 times 1, I bring it over. So the first partial product is 2,000, so I can also write 2,000 in this first section to say that 2 groups of 1,000 is the inside number. That's the answer. Put your plus sign, and then we moved to the next section. So the next section, there was a 9 in the hundreds place. So we said 2 groups of 900, using the zeros trick, 2 zeros. Make sure that you're lining those place values up so you can already have your stacked value. 2 times 9 gives me the answer of 18. So that gets placed right in the thousands place and the hundreds place. So 1,800 is the second partial product that I can place in the area model. And then the last section that's left is what is this tiny portion representing. So this tiny portion that's representing is in the tens place. So we say 2 groups of 90. So we showed 2 times 90. 2 times 90, we have a 0, place a 0 in the correct place value, and then we're left with the basic fact again of 2 times 9 is 18. And now I have my stacked value. I also don't want to forget to rewrite that answer, so we're putting plus 180. Then we add, starting the ones place, zeros get brought down. In the tens place, 0 plus 0 plus 8 is 8. In the hundreds place, 0 plus 8 plus 1 is 9. Comma, in the thousands place, we have 2 plus 1 is 3. So our actual answer is 3,980. Well, I know that I also have to find the estimated answer to tell whether or not the estimate is reasonable to the exact answer. So we're going to start with the exact problem. So we started with the number 1,990 times 2. But we know that when we're estimating, we have to pull the larger factor to the side by estimating to the largest place value. We're going to underline the thousands place and point next door. So find the place, go next door, 5 or more, raise a score. So the 9 is 5 or more, so we're raising the score of the underlined digit. So that means we're adding to that. That changes to a 2. Then we look to the right, zeros in sight. We have 1, 2, 3 places that turn into zeros. So my rounded number is 2,000. Then I pull my second factor to stay the same, but rewrite in the new problem. Use the zeros trick, count those 3 zeros, place them in your product, lasso your basic fact. So 2 times 2 is 4. So our rounded or estimated number is 4,000. When we make the comparison to say, is 4,000 close to the exact answer of 3,980, we would say yes, so check it, and then you can write the word, this is considered a reasonable estimate. The next practice, it says to select all. So box those words because these are our clues to say that there is more than one answer that's going to be considered to be correct. Select all the expressions that have 1,600 as a partial product. So when we look at that, we need to be able to determine what does that mean. So looking at these numbers, we're going to say 1,600 is going to be the answer when we separate these into an actual place value. So we can use the first one as an example. If we said 4,000 plus 300 plus 80 plus 1. Looking at this number pulled into expanded form, we have to determine, are we able to multiply the original factor by any of the place valued numbers to get 1,600 as an answer? So we can look at them. 4 times 4,000 would not give me 1,600 because I have too many zeros in my original factor to get this. I then move to the 300. There are 2 zeros in the answer, but if I'm left with my basic fact of 4 times 3, that won't give me the 16 that I would need to place. So that is no longer going to be an answer choice. So I can go ahead and mark that out. I want you to go ahead and do the same type of work for the remaining 5. Pull the second factor out and show the value for each place value in expanded form. Then you're going to either check to say that 1,600 will be the answer when you multiply the original small factor by one of the pulled apart values, or mark it with an X like we did in the original if 1,600 will not be an answer to any of the smaller multiplication problems. Then once you're done, you can push play on the video again and check your work. Now that you have solved your problem, you need to make sure you're checking. You are asked to use the second factor to pull apart into expanded form showing the individual values of each of the digits. And then you were able to then multiply the original factor by the pulled apart number to see if any of your smaller multiplication problems would result in an answer of 1,600. The first one we did together, and none of our values would have given us that answer, so we X'd it out to eliminate it. The second one, when you pulled apart the values, you should have been able to determine the value of the 2 in the hundreds place, or 200, would be able to multiply by the factor of 8 to get to the number. So this is our first choice. The third choice, when you pull apart the value of 1,408, you would have been able to select the 4 in the hundreds place to say 400 times the original factor of 4 would get 1,600 as an answer. So this is a second choice. And the third problem, when you pulled apart the value of 7,881, you would have found that 800, or the 8 in the hundreds place multiplied by the original factor, would have resulted in the product of 1,600. Because we found 3 answers, we would have then marked that there are 3 answer choices. The last problem did not result in the answer, so we would have eliminated that as a choice as well. The last problem that you're going to do today is a word problem practice. So you're going to read this problem carefully, make sure that you circle your important numbers and labels, box your keywords, and underline your question. Once you determine what the information is needed, pull your numbers to the side. You will probably have multiple steps, so make sure that you're reading this carefully. Once you're done, write your 3 to 5 sentence reflection on the steps to use to complete an area model with partial product type of problem. Remember, there are 3 steps to this type of problem. The first is to have your area model and use that information to pull apart the values of each of the digits. Then you're going to have your second part is to estimate to find the rounded product. Then the third step is to make that comparison to determine whether or not the estimated number and the actual answer are considered reasonable or not reasonable. Make sure that when you're done with your practice problem and reflection, take the picture and submit to today's work. Then your classwork that you're going to be completing is in your Envisions workbook. That's the thin, skinny one that has the black and white pages. Looking at pages 35 and 36, you are going to complete the even numbers. Make sure that you have your notebook out, and that way you can reference the examples that we've done. So you are going to complete numbers 2, 4, and 6. You have 3 steps for completing. So remember, 3 steps. You're going to show the multiplication by stacking the partial products, fill in those partial products in your area model, and then tell whether or not your answer is reasonable or not. Then turn your page. You're going to complete the word problem for number 8, number 10, and the assessment practice number 12. Once you're done, take a picture of both sides. You have 4 things to submit for today's lesson.